All right, so you're welcome back to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program. My name is Pakwisi Asare. We're going to delve straight into our very next subject, and my guest in the studio, Winslow Sakifio. He's a stock analyst with First Bank Financial Services. Winslow, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And the man who needs no introduction. Oh, I just forgot your name. Mr. Joe Jackson, also an economist, has joined us in the studio. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. So, elections in Africa, as you may know, is usually characterized by tensions, which end up translating into business uncertainties, especially for investment. Now, already estimates suggest that Ghana's economy has seen a decline in investment in 2016 due to poll uncertainties. But how true is this? What is the true situation? And should the business community be worried about events leading up to this year's elections? That's what we're seeking to discuss tonight with my guests in the studio. Once again, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'll start off with you, Mr. Joe Jackson. Now, Ghana has over the years built a congenial environment for investment in Africa. Have we, as a political community, conducted ourselves well enough to sustain this confidence?
The answer is yes and no. In that, in times past, I mean, one of the things which we did really well was the ability to resolve last year's conflict over the election in the court, and for the losing party to accept that it's okay, I've lost this and I'll move on and I'll fight another day, which was the election petition. That was fantastic. But in the run-up to this election, especially at the latter part of last year, there were increasing incidents of violence, acid pouring, this, that, where all of a sudden people started getting really scared about this particular election. And so what you found out that was that a lot of the really big money, which was not tied to the government, kind of adopted a wait and see. But interestingly, as we get closer to the election, aside from the incident that happened over last weekend, or was it last weekend? No, it was the previous weekend, over the altercation in front of the
opposition party
leader's house. Things had been fairly calm, and we had actually received really good marks for the way that the election had been handled. Yes, things had boiled over, but people at the same time too, by what our quick and prompt reaction to the Muntie 3 and other things, it was felt that Ghana was managing this process quite well. And you would see that when we jumped out of line with respect to that incident, you can see that the international community reacted fairly harshly.
I've got to ask this question. How much of weight does Ghana carry in the Committee of Nations? When you look at Africa, how much of importance does the international community place on Ghana as a nation?
Well, one thing I can tell you, we punch above our weight, which is to say that we are like a bellwether. If things are going right with Ghana, it is expected that other nations will look at us. If things are going wrong, well, we're not a Nigeria. We're not a South Africa.
Or probably a Kenya.
But I assure you that we punch above our weight in terms of the size of our economy or our population. We're regarded as one of the beacons of democracy in sub-Saharan Africa. If you read the Economist article, the whole article was predicated on the fact that Ghana is a beacon of hope, and maybe we are not able to match up to our role or what the rest of Africa or the world expects from us. But the truth of the matter is that we were handling it fairly well. And I don't think that beyond investments that there was any real slowdown beyond what had been decided maybe over a year ago. It wasn't like the run-up had been characterized by extraordinary violence or anything. Yes, there had been the usual give and take, but hey, in the run-up to the UK elections, a female MP was killed.
Winslow, are you also of the opinion that there's a wait-and-see attitude?
Yeah, definitely. If you watch the numbers, you look at volumes traded at the stock exchange, you look at treasury bill bids and offer and all that, you notice that suddenly.
But not as much as you would think. Because if there's a sense that things are going to be peaceful, well, the policeman doing his work well or not does not have as much of an influence. But when there's a real sense that things are not going to be peaceful, then of course it matters. But by that time, the investor will be long hiding his money away and not looking. So the posture of the where investors in particular are concerned, the posture of the security agency is actually a secondary matter. What matters is how much tension is there in the country, how much of a feeling that this is a do and die affair, how much do we have supporters ready to attack each other, and how much on both sides of the divide are we willing to accept. Those are the things. So it's really about tensions. The more there is tension, the more there is uncertainty, the more there is a threat of violence, the more investors will hide. But bear in mind, it's not been as bad as it could have been. Over the last couple of days, you've seen T-bill rates drop. That tells us that there is a little liquidity in the market. Maybe it's also because the government has moved part of its debt into long term, but there's a little bit more liquidity. And I'll be honest with you, we are not seeing, and in my own firm in Daylex Finance, we're not seeing the dearth of liquidity that has characterized the run-up to elections in times past.
Shortly, we're going to be hearing from the managing director of Investcorp, Samson Akligo, who also has some thoughts to share on this subject. But I'm going to pose this question before we go to him. It's good to talk about a lot of liquidity being in the system. Will that engender a lot of expenditure on the part of Ghanaians? Mind you, we're just entering into the Yuletide season where people would like to obviously spend. How do you juxtapose this two?
Well, I didn't say there was a lot of liquidity. I said there was a little bit more liquidity.
A little bit more liquidity?
Yes.
Okay.
But
what does that mean anyway?
That means that the investors are prepared to put money into the market.
Okay.
Right? And not run to redeem instruments.
But are local investors themselves willing to spend in this period?
I'm not sure that our consumers are spending. First of all, there's not that much money. The economy is suffering. I mean,
even in your Yuletide season?
Even in the Yuletide season. Listen, what you have to look at, how many people have been laid off? How many people have had their incomes cut? In real terms, not even in nominal terms, in real terms. So the general impression is that there's a little less money in everybody's pocket, and everybody's thinking of a slightly tighter Christmas than it should be.
And you think this is a peculiar year?
It is peculiar because usually in the run-up to elections, there's a little bit more money in the system because there are a few more what I call the populist measures that put money in everybody's pocket, a subsidy here, a pay rise there. And this year, things are tighter. And because of the IMF, because of other
You think it's an adherence to the IMF policy? All right, so let's get now to hear from the managing director of Investcorp, Samson Akligo. He says a wait-and-see attitude cliche, which has been adopted by the domestic business community, is unnecessary and a psychological barrier.
I think there's a domestic mantra where people still have this mentality that the election is coming, let's wait and see. I think it's unnecessary. I think it's highly unnecessary. But the key thing is that big investment decisions, foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, what you want to see is that you want to be guided by economic policy, maybe over the next 2 to 3 years. You see, and you want to negotiate with a government that you can negotiate with at least over the next 6 months to 1 year. So when you have elections coming, it is expected that investment decisions will be delayed because you want to be sure that the same government is going to remain in power or a new government is coming to power. So what is fundamental, for almost every economy, especially for small open economies like Ghana, is that especially big investors, both IFD and portfolio investors, would want to see really how will the political dynamics change, and then that fits into investment decisions, especially those that you cannot negotiate immediately. I think that the idea of domestic Ghanaian investors actually putting investment on hold is a psychological barrier that needs to be worked on, because we have gone through elections. We also even understand that when it comes to economic policy, the difference between the two major political parties is quite, very minimal. Most of them are pro-market, pro-private sector, and then we have seen this dynamics since 1992, and what's the benefit of democracy and successful elections is that you must reduce anxiety, it must face into positive expectations, and it must also lead to less disruption, of course, in the domestic economy. And I think when we start building the confidence at the domestic level, over time, we would also get foreign direct investment and even portfolio investors from outside the country to even have a better confidence, because we are very sure about the stability of the country.
All right, so you just had the managing director of Investcorp, Samson Akligo, speaking there. I don't know if you want to give a reaction to that.
Yes, he spoke about a psychological barrier that we need to overcome. The problem is that psychological barriers are very, very difficult to overcome. So in as much as we would wish that everybody would act normal in times like these, it is not very easy to do it. You would have astute business owners who are still using the wait and see attitude. Not because they don't know what is going on or they haven't seen any election before, but it's just something that is to protect their interest. And it's psychological, so it's difficult to mitigate against.
All right, we're talking about investment in the run-up to the December polls. We've got just about 14, 15 days to the 2016 general elections, and already we've been told investors are adopting a wait-and-see attitude. My guest in the studio, Mr. Joe Jackson, he's an economist, and Winslow Sakifio, he's a stock analyst with First Bank Financial Services. Before we went on the break, Mr. Jackson, I was asking if leadership matters in all these, and I cited the example of America when Donald Trump won, and what we saw happening on the Asian stock market, even in the currency, for instance. How much of effect does leadership play?
Well, in Ghana, not much in terms of the external community. Why? Because if you look carefully at the policies of both sides of the divide, or the two parties who are likely to have a role in whether the largest opposition or the ruling party, when you look at them, there's not much difference in the economic, what I call orthodoxy. They're the same policies slanted different ways, whether it's one dam, one district, or one hospital, one district, or one branch. But it's all about bringing infrastructure to the people and improving the infrastructure at that level.
Right.
Really, it's a matter of this is more corrupt than the other, or this is be slightly more prudent in managing the economy than the other. Those are the things we talk about.
But we've also had some political parties seem to suggest that perhaps their opponents on the other side may have a very terrible leadership and a vote for my other party could plunge the nation into crisis. How much of impact does that make for investors?
I think, as Mr. Jackson said, for us in Ghana, the differences are not much. And it looks like with time, the political parties have come to realize that they need to toe a certain line for the populace to vote for them. So when you look at their manifestos, the theme in there, they are basically the same. It's just the implementation that changes.
So the themes are the same. What about the personalities? Because you are having a situation where a particular political leader is being tagged as perhaps violent. I mean, that's quite serious. And for the investor out there, what would it mean?
Yes, the good thing about the investors is that they can read underneath all the things being churned out by the media. It's a political game, so you try to make your opponent look bad. But when you look beneath the surface, leadership-wise, I don't think the differences are so much that you vote for one party, the economy will plunge into crisis. You vote for the other one, it wouldn't. I don't think that's the point. What we have is that there are two parties with virtually the same ideas, but different ways of implementing it. And with that, we won't have a very terrible situation if we decide to vote for one party and not the other. For us, the situation is different. When
Something
you take
quite phenomenal happened in 2000 after President Kufuor had won his elections. We saw a rise in foreign direct investment, a lot of investor confidence and all that. Is that something that's likely to happen again?
I don't think so, because when you take 2000, we had Rawlings ruling for a very long time, and then we wanted to change over. That was, I think, one of the few times we were handing over power from one political party to the other. It was done in the past, but this recent past was the one we had. And I think the foreign investors felt that maybe there might be a problem. We had a leader who has been in power for 19 years, and African leaders. But what happened was we didn't see that. There was a smooth transition. Rawlings handed over to Kufuor. And when the international community saw that, I mean, we have somebody who has been in power for 19 years, was able to hand over to an opponent smoothly, then it means Ghana as a country is politically stable.
Mr. Jackson, so the dynamics are not exactly the same here.
Listen, what will make a difference? Each time we go through a peaceful election, there'll be a boost. And it does not matter
who is the leader.
Exactly. Now, the more unlikely there is that there'll be peaceful election, the bigger the boost after. So
the more unlikely there is to be a peaceful election, the more
the bigger the boost,
okay,
if there is a peaceful election.
Okay.
Now, remember that in the handover from His Excellency President J.J. Rawlings to His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor, it was thought that that handover will not happen because, and it was unlikely to happen peacefully,
right,
and without rancor. So again, expectations were low, and when it happened peacefully, it rose through the roof, and we had that boost. That today, the question is, how low are expectations? I don't think they are so low as we expect that if one side of the divide wins or the other side of the divide wins, there'll be a failure of handover or anything. Not on the scale at which we had when it was the first time we're trying this. Remember, now we've been through this. This is our third time. We've handed over before, from Rawlings to Kufuor, from Kufuor to Mills. So even if there's a changeover, it's not a big deal. If it stays the same, it's not a big deal. So I don't think that boost will happen, simply because we're used to a certain election, and we're getting to the point where even the investors are assuming that despite all our challenges, we will go through.
Maybe the worry is because, as some have said, the stakes are higher this time. Now, if you read that Economic Times Economist report, it seems to say something quite, important, which is a truism, that the opposition party, as we have it now, has gone through 2 elections and may not have enough money to be able to, stand for another election in the next 4 years. So this is almost like a do or die affair for the opposition party.
Listen, the opposition had been through 17 plus years of not being in power. And yet, His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor won power. I don't agree with that part of the statement. I just don't agree with it. And that time, what was our experience? It had been President Liman, then over to the PNDC era, through the NDC era, 19 years plus, where the Busia Dankwa had been in opposition. And
so you believe change will come when it has to come?
When it has to come, when the people of Ghana believe that change has to come, they will effect the change.
Winslow, you agree or you disagree with that part of the report by The Economist?
I would agree that the stakes are high, but not for the reason they are given.
Not for the reason that the opposition is dry?
No, I don't think so. I think it's because the elections have been so close in the past that, I mean, you have both parties getting a little over 5 million, and the difference between them is very, very small, and that's what makes the stakes so high. It's not because one party is running dry.
I've got to say a big thank you to you, gentlemen. Joe Jackson is an economist, and Winslow Sakifio, also a stock analyst. Thank you very much for your time. Now, your business and the health of your workers are directly related. The more time you spend away from work due to ill health, the less productive they are to your business. To keep your business productivity high at all times, be sure to provide your workers with good health insurance like Acacia Health Insurance. Acacia Health Insurance will provide your staff with great customer service, quick payments on claims, IT support for quick service, and coverage in all the 10 regions of the country. Give your business what it needs with the #1 health insurance provider, Acacia. Acacia, we place value on those you value. That's how we wrap up on our show for this week. My name is Parkwesi Asare. We'll see you same time next week.